Welcome to the Crypto Cartel. I'm your host, Brus.
And I am Ed Anderson. Today in the show, we're going to show you, we're going to take you behind the curtain of the ideological and physical battle that is taking place in the crypto banks and governments all around the world.
Now, most people get involved in crypto because they want to make some money, but there's a much deeper and darker side to crypto that almost no one is talking about or understands. Now, cast your mind back just a few years ago when crypto came onto the scene. There were so many haters out there. You might have even been one of them. I know I was a little bit skeptical when we first kicked off in this industry. And that's because crypto represents the alternative to the current fiat system. And people's lack of understanding that the fiat system is governed by criminals, thieves, and corruption led them to believe that there's nothing better than the fiat monetary system, and crypto is a scam.
You know, Rob, it's funny. Looking back at all those haters, especially that moron, Jordan Belfort, because never has any individual or group of people been more wrong. The stats don't lie, right? Crypto and blockchain technology is the highest adopted thing in human history. I mean, just think about what kind of a statement that is. And it proves beyond all doubt that people want an alternative to the current system. And the haters, about crypto, they were all wrong. So today on the podcast, Rob, we are going to show you the less talked about darker side of this amazing time in history.
Let's get started. Well, g'day, Ed. How you going, mate?
Hey, Rob. How you doing, my friend?
I'm really excited. I'm excited. I'm always excited. I always start a podcast by saying I'm excited, and that's because I genuinely am. And I'm looking forward to pressing the record button on this podcast because this is a conversation that I've had with a lot of people in the last couple of months, and it always raises some eyebrows, and it gets people thinking, whoa, I didn't know that, and I wasn't aware of that. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today, you may never have heard before, or you might have heard by some tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists, but I can assure you that Ed and I had neither of those things. All we're going to do is talk about the facts, the future, and about some alternatives that are out there.
Yeah, same here, Rob. I can't wait to get into this either. But before we do, Rob, if it's okay with you, I want to introduce our audience to an amazing piece of technology that we have at our disposal on this show. In fact, it's proprietary technology. Nobody else has this. Folks, Rob and I have a time machine. That's right, a time machine. Now, from time to time on this show, we're going to set the controls on that trusty machine and take you back to the not too distant past and remind you what happened the last time that things happened, that things happened that happened then are happening now. So history repeats itself, right? Especially when we're talking about money and the fiat systems. So from time to time, Rob and I are going to spend a lot of extra money on the electricity to ramp up that time machine, set the controls on the time machine, and take you into the past and take you on a journey to highlight the madness of the current circumstances. And, so you can learn, and so we can all learn the hard lessons of our ancestors. What do you say, Rob? Should we get started?
Yeah, let's do it, man. That sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, Ed, let's kick this off. Let's put the time machine aside for 1 second and kick off by saying that let's make a couple of bold statements. And we sort of said it in the introduction here, but I think personally that 10 out of 10 people that get involved in crypto, they do it because they want to make money. And look, there's nothing wrong with that at all. When you're going to get involved in any type of investment or any type of scheme, it's usually to make a better future for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think I'm not trying to say it's good or it's bad. I'm just trying to say that 10 out of 10 people that get involved do it because they want to make money. So I'm going to make another bold statement and put that right next to it and say that if those same 10 out of 10 people knew that crypto was actually a war, then I'm not so sure that they would actually get involved in it because people don't want to be caught in the crossfire of a war. And it doesn't matter how much money or how much opportunity you stand to have. if you're going to step onto the battlefield and step into danger, you're probably not going to put your money at risk or put your life at risk to be involved in something like that. And they're big, bold statements. I know that. I get that. And there's always going to be people out there that take risks and do it anyway. But it's hard to get people to fight for something when there's no real gain for them. But here in our case with crypto, financial gain is the motivator. And if there's some money to be made and some fast money to be made, because at every turn you see some 25-year-old Lambo driving crypto millionaire, you want to turn a blind eye to all the darker side of things that are going on. You might not even know about those things. That's the point of today's podcast. And you want to get involved in crypto because you want to make a fast buck, because you recognize that this is the opportunity of a lifetime. So let's kick off, Ed, with those bold statements in mind. And why don't you tell us what some of the darker side of crypto is?
Okay, well, anyone that has tried to buy Bitcoin or any other crypto will quickly discover that the process is not simple. If you already own crypto, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so first you need to find an exchange, right? Maybe several exchanges. Then you need to complete your KYC checks. Now, for those of you who don't know, KYC stands for Know Your Customer. Okay, then you have to wait. Sometimes the approval can take more than a week. So you just never know. Now, once you're approved, and even that's not guaranteed, then you'll need to learn how to navigate these new platforms that you've never seen before. So KYC and learning curve aside, the next roadblock you're going to come up against will be your bank. Now, once you've discovered how to purchase your Bitcoin or any other crypto, the next thing you'll need to do is to pay the exchange for it, right? So you may pop in your credit card like any other e-commerce check out there, only to find out that your bank rejects the transaction. But why? The bank never asked where you got the money from when you put the money into the bank in the first place. So why are they now dictating what you can spend your money on? The answer is simple. They are not real.
Well, here we are at bold statement number 3. They're not real. What do you mean they're not real?
Well, when you put your money in your bank, you're loaning it to them. And when you go to withdraw it, they're making it up out of thin air and giving it back to you. All right. So when you go to the bank or to any cash point or onto your phone to make a withdrawal, to withdraw your money, there isn't some person who goes into a bank vault and then moves your money over to a different pile in order to make it their money. Right? The transactions happen on a computer, and they are no more real than the promises that come out of a politician's mouth. Okay, it's not fractional reserve lending either. Okay, you don't deposit $100 so that they can go out and loan out $90 of it. Okay, that is how it used to work way back in the days long ago. Back in the day with the Rothschilds, where fractional reserve lending cycle would go around, 28 times. But who was counting how many times it happened, right? The banks? Surely not, right? So today, the bank creates credit out of thin air. That is what their banking charter allows them to do. It doesn't matter what you think. That is a fact that almost no one knows about. And it's the basis of the world's biggest Ponzi scheme. There is no moving of money from one vault to another, no reconciliation with banks for checks, not like the old days, right? It is a simple creation of credit that is governed by their banking license that is issued by the government. So it begs the question, right? Why did the bank stop me from buying crypto?
It's a lot of what you said. A lot of people would know that already, but many people would be hearing that for the first time. And that's why I wanted to record this podcast. And we titled this podcast, Crypto is a War, because I think it's really important that people understand what they're getting into. And here we are at the heart of the problem. Getting signed up, the KYC, navigating the platforms, and then trying to actually make a purchase. Why is this a problem? Why are they stopping you? What the hell? They never asked me where I got my money from when I put it in there, and now they're telling me what I can spend it on. It just doesn't make any sense. And the reason for it is the bank won't allow you to spend your money on crypto because they know as soon as you swap your fiat dollars for crypto, it rarely comes back into the fiat system. And because the bank needs to keep on creating credit to survive, they know that your crypto transaction represents the endpoint for those funds. That's the problem. They know the money leaves their system and it's not going to come back to their system. And all money that's ever existed has been existed because somebody needed a loan at some point and the bank passed the loan out there. Now think of all the credit that's out there on planet Earth. It's an incredible amount of money that's out there. Just think of your country and think of the people that you know and what they owe in their businesses and their vehicles and their properties and their commercial properties. Think of all the liabilities that they have. The bank has lent all of that money out there that's in society. The government didn't print that. The amount of cash that's in society represents anywhere from 6 to 8% of the total credit that's out there. Now, if everybody paid all of their bills back to the bank all at once, or to the banks all at once, there's not enough money in society for that to actually happen. The banks never want you to pay off your debts. They never want you to clear out that debt that you've got, because as soon as you do that, they're going to have to go and find another pesky customer they can charge interest on. And because the bank needs to keep creating credit to survive, they know that your crypto transaction represents the endpoint for these funds, folks. Just remember that. I've said that a couple of times because it's a really, really important point. And the reason it's so important is it means that they can no longer create credit to give it out to you on your savings or to give it to somebody else because you're withdrawn that money and you're not bringing it back to them. Remember that every dollar has been created by the banks to lend to somebody else, and the banks don't want you to pay off your debts. So when you take your money out of there, you're not usually using debt. You know, you might be paying for your crypto with your Visa debit card or your MasterCard debit card. You might even buy it with a credit card, but it's unusual for people to buy, in my experience, crypto with credit from the bank. They're typically doing it with their money, meaning their savings, meaning that money will never go back to that institution. So what does it mean for them to find another pesky customer? Well, they've got millions of customers. What's the problem with that? Well, what they want to do is keep their revenue streams going. That's why they don't want to let you go. So that $20 that you've got in your wallet, just remember that $20 was given to somebody at some point who borrowed that money, and it's transacted all the way through society and it's landed in your wallet. Think about the time when you've had credit. You've had credit from the bank to buy a house, to buy a car, something for your business, a personal loan, a credit card, something like that, and you've purchased it, and that money is then moved on to somebody else. That's the credit that you have in your wallet. It's come from somebody else, and originally it came from a bank, from some version of a loan. So, by the way, just on that point there, do you have any cash in your wallet right now? I don't know about you, but I haven't had cash in my wallet for a long time, right? There's absolutely no requirement for me to do that. And ask yourself, why is that? That's a whole completely different subject altogether. But the bank wants to keep your money in circulation, and it never wants you to pay your debts back. And if you do, they'll have no reason to create credit for you, asking for more of that credit because you've got it over there in crypto. And the other thing is, this is a really another big, bold statement. This is number 4 for the podcast so far. The government doesn't want you to take your money out of the fiat system either. And they definitely don't want you to pay off the banks either. Because the minute that you do that, there's no more tax implication. So there's no way that they can collect tax revenue off what the bank collects off you, and they can't collect GST or VAT off you when you're spending the money in society. So the government has even less incentive to allow you to tip your money into crypto than what the banks do, because the banks are the ones that make money out of thin air. It's just like magic. They just make it up and give it out in society. But the government relies on the banks to create the credit so they can collect on the tax that they actually need as well. What do you think about all that, Ed? It's pretty crazy, right?
Oh, man, so much good stuff there. Some countries have a blanket ban on crypto. If money from their citizens bleeds into crypto, it's going to bankrupt them. Okay? It goes to the very heart of countries being in constant debt and borrowing more and more money just to pay the interest off to cover the repayments. Okay, the government issues bonds, right? The reserve banks buy those bonds either directly or indirectly. The government has printed money without having to directly tax citizens. So they now give the appearance of prosperity. Okay? They pay their debt back with pennies on the dollar in the future with hidden taxation of inflation, since the bonds only have a tiny interest rate on them, right? So if fiat money leaves the system, it will collapse the government plan. The governments will fail. The banks will fail. The whole system just becomes untenable.
Yeah, it's just a crazy circumstance when you think about it. I would suggest to you that 10 out of 10 people that get into crypto don't think of these things at all. It's not something that you consider. It's not something that you think about when you're getting into crypto, because you got a little bit of white line fever to make some quick money in crypto, or to take your money out of the stock market or out of property and invest it somewhere else, or whatever reasons that you've got to get into crypto. You've got those reasons, but they're usually to make money. So people don't really think about the actual battlefield that they're stepping into until the bank goes, you can't spend your money there. Look, over the years, I've helped a lot of people from all different parts of the world to get into crypto. They're always saying, reaching out to me on social media, what are you doing? How do you do that? And I help them through the process and make it happen for them. But, in life, you have the exception and the rule. And the exception for the first crypto transaction is that it goes through without any issues at all. The rule is that people normally struggle for hours, sometimes even days, to get their very first crypto transaction done. The good news about all of that is once you've got the first one in place and everything's working like it is supposed to, then it's there to stay and it's not going anywhere else. And what I always recommend is people give themselves a couple of different on-ramps and off-ramps to get in and out of crypto, because we're talking about two different types of currency systems here, and you need to have a foot in both of those camps, and you need to have options to come out to your bank, to go to your bank, or to go from your bank to crypto, and to come out of crypto back to your bank as well. There's different ways to do that. So in places like the Caribbean, I've had a bunch of clients there. I've had a bunch of people call me on the phone. Hello, man. I saw you on YouTube and I want to get into crypto, blah, blah. That's the extent of my accent. But I'm like, well, where are you calling from? I'm hearing a familiar Caribbean accent there. And they're like, I'm calling from some part of the world there. And they're like, I can't buy crypto. I just can't do it. And what I discovered after, I don't know, maybe half a dozen people and one of my friends that I've met in this crypto space, she's told me all about it and I helped her to navigate the challenge. The banks and the government there simply block every single transaction to do with crypto. And think of your jurisdiction where you reside in the world. Do you have a hard time with it? And you think of somewhere like the Caribbean, it's not a very big place. I can see why they don't want their money coming out of society, or, the government needs the tax revenue. I sort of understand that. But in the UK, they have some blanket bans as well. In Europe, mainland Europe, they have that. Here in Australia, they have that as well. No, you can't buy crypto. And you get on the phone and call them and go, hey, you never asked me where I got the money from when I put it in there. And now you're telling me where I can spend it. They're like, bad luck. Bad luck. We just say, no, we're not doing it. And there's literally nothing that you can do. And that's how this evil cabal controls us. They control us by controlling the financial system and the money that we have. The solution in the Caribbean is what I discovered you have to do a triple pike half backflip to actually get there, is to use a money wiring service. So you wire your money from your bank account to one of these other money wiring services. And what you do is you put your cash on an anonymous prepaid online credit card, then go to an exchange and then purchase it with that, because they can't track where that credit card has come from because there's no details there. So there's no way that you can use your regular bank account or your regular credit card or your Visa or MasterCard debit card to buy crypto in that part of the world, because the banks just have a blanket ban and they don't allow it. And the Caribbean's not the only country to have had that. Other countries like El Salvador, you have the opposite of things like that going on, where they're using Bitcoin as the reserve currency and the preferred currency in their country as well. So we're seeing both sides of the coin there, which is a really interesting time.
Rob, I think what a beautiful segue. We are now entering the overriding theme of this podcast, as far as I'm concerned. The very core at the idea of freedom is your ability to come and go as you please and to say whatever you want. Now, to do that, you do need money. Now, most of us in Western societies, we have enough money to do that, and we would consider ourselves to be free. But what happens when the powers that be decide that you can no longer spend your money on something? That suddenly amounts to a third party in no position of authority controlling what you do, what what you can do, where you can go, and what you can say. Now, without money, those basic rights that make up freedom go away. That is the very definition of repression. Repression is the first step to controlling someone or something, right? The next step is penalty for noncompliance. Then comes resistance. Then comes the uprising, right? Now, if the problems are not resolved, the outcome is conflict or war. Now, it sounds like a long bow to draw. However, banks and governments all over the world have fired the first shot in this conflict by telling you what you can and cannot spend your money on, especially as it relates to crypto. Now, this amounts to coercion, and will ultimately lead to some type of conflict. I just have to believe that.
I totally agree with that. And we said right at the top of the show that we were going to make some big, bold statements, and we definitely have. And I think if people realize what they were getting involved in as it related to crypto, they would go into it with a bit more with their eyes a little bit more open, the aperture open a little bit more, and maybe with their heart closed a little bit more, because you got to be careful that you don't get hurt in the process of doing these things. And if something goes wrong, or it's not going your way, or the bank says no to you and they put roadblocks and barriers there, that can be emotionally pretty taxing. And I've seen many people just give up. And I've seen many people just go, you know what, it's just all too hard. And then I've seen the cabal win, because I've seen the look on the people's faces who give up because it's just too hard and they couldn't be bothered and they didn't want it bad enough. And what that means that they've been coerced into complying with something that they don't want to comply with. And that, my friends, is the definition. That, my friends, is the definition of totalitarianism. That's where it begins. And that's where a collectivist, socialist, communist society begins, when they debase the currency, tell you what you can and can't spend your money on, and stop you from doing what it is that you want to do. Coercion and repression is the name of the game in the 21st century, in the war of crypto and fiat that we're in. Let's take a little break and we'll be right back.
So, Rob, banks and governments colluding together to stop us getting into crypto and out of their corrupt system. What do you personally think of all this?
Oh, here we go. All the way down the rabbit hole. This is what a podcast is for, right? Well, I think the fiat system has always been a sham. There's always been something about it that just didn't feel right to me. I remember in 1987 when I was a kid and the stock market crashed. I remember my old man coming home, scratching his head, and he had the newspapers and all of these things were going on, and he was talking about that, and I didn't really understand it. And it all sounded very adult to me. But I also remember seeing the worry on his face, and he was really worried about it. And I think he was just worried about the stocks and shares that he had and the retirement that he was trying to build for himself and whatnot. And it was a scary, scary time for sure. That's kind of my first memory of that being a scam. And how old was I? I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. Fast forward to just maybe a year ago or so, and I came across this book here called The Creature from Jekyll Island, and it's written by a fellow named G. Edward Griffin. And what he does is he documents everything that we're talking about here. And as I read that book, it's a bit of a murder mystery more than it is a textbook or a history lesson on the Federal Reserve and the way the money system actually works. I felt myself thinking, yeah, I kind of knew that. I knew that there was something off about that. There's something not quite right about it. And part of the reason that you feel like that when you hear truth, because you can't unhear truth, is because you're not taught these things in school. And there's very little way that you can do research to back up the claims and the feelings that you're something not right about that. It doesn't feel right. Well, what do you mean, man? That's just how the system is. There's no way for me to back those claims up. So Edward Griffin has done a great job there in that book, documenting everything and giving you all the reference points you've got there. Soon after I read that book, I discovered this book here. It's called The Best Enemy Money Can Buy. And this fella did a study in the early 1970s, and he wrote 3 academic books, 3 big volumes of books, to show how the American government and American companies were funding communism. It's unbelievable. And the title of the book says it all, the best enemy money can buy. And there's a little piece in the start of the book where they talk about there's a pilot flying over the top of the Ho Chi Minh Trail in the Vietnam War, and he looks out the window and goes, "They look like Ford trucks." They're Ford trucks. Those trucks were built in a factory in the Soviet Union, and that production line was created by Henry Ford. And those trucks were 80% of the wartime materials that went to North Vietnam came from the Soviet Union, including those Ford trucks that were used to transport troops, weapons, and supplies to fight against American and coalition GIs. What the hell? It's just a really, really sad state of affairs. So this is Ed and I using our time machine to go back into the past and talk about something nearby in the Vietnam War. But if we set the controls of our time machine all the way back, what we'll find is that the Federal Reserve Bank has actually been tried 4 times. So the one that we see today, the Federal Reserve, is time number 4, but 3 times previously, they tried to have a central bank in the United States, and the whole thing came undone and the whole thing collapsed. And I'm not going to go into the details of it. You can find all of the details here, and I'll link to the Audible version of that book so you can check that out for yourself. But Edward does a great job of detailing the history and showing you how no matter what happens, a fiat system always collapses and always comes undone. And the current iteration of what we're looking at now with the Federal Reserve is time number 4, and this kicked off in 1913. In 1910, when they figured out the idea, there was $1,000 that could buy you $1,000 worth of goods. And in 1990, that same $1,000 required $10,000. So we had a how many percentage increase there? 1,000% increase in inflation over that period of time. And just in the last couple of years, we've seen unbelievable money printing in our supply. In fact, in the last 3 years, the Federal Reserve has been printing money into oblivion, and they've printed more than $3 trillion in the last couple of years. And they've just passed legislation in the US to print even more. And they're doing this on purpose. And they're doing this because they're trying to print the money into oblivion to bring down the entire system. This is the end of the fiat system as we know it. And this is what the Great Reset is, right? They're trying to completely abolish cash. They're trying to completely abolish the banking system and say, oh, the banking system doesn't work. Now we're going to have to go to a one world currency and a one world digital currency as well. And if you don't get on board with that, well, you're going to be left behind. There's all sorts of negative ramifications that we'll talk about in a sec. But this is all part of a plan. This is not me wearing a tinfoil hat telling you about something in history from some imaginary time machine that I've got going on. This is happening right here in front of us. And the problem with these things is that they unfold slowly. So you can't really react to these things because you're seeing them unfold and you're like, oh, what can I do about it anyway? Well, what do I care? That's the Federal Reserve in America. I'm here in Australia. I'm in Sydney, in Cronulla Beach, for heaven's sake. What do I care about the Federal Reserve? No. The Federal Reserve is where the US dollar comes from, and the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. And they've just been printing it into absolute oblivion. And you know, Ed, that it's created all sorts of problems related to inflation, to the supply chain there. And the government that you have there is so unbelievably incompetent that they deliberately took your energy independence away. And then you folks are in for a rough ride there. And it is a real big problem. I want to clarify one thing about the Federal Reserve, because I've been banging on about that a little bit here. A lot of people think that the Federal Reserve is a private company, and it is. It's a private entity, but it's a hybrid of government and private at the same time. So an example of that is the chairman is appointed by the president of the United States. So the Federal Reserve is not part of the government, but they're not a private company either. So they're intimately connected and intertwined. And when they got together in 1910 to concoct the idea of the Federal Reserve, the idea was to eliminate competition, and they were just a group of banks that came together to eliminate competition, and they coerced politicians over a 3-year period to write legislation that allows them to commit the crimes that they still commit today legally. Now, again, there's big, bold statement number 5. What crimes are the Federal Reserve in the United States committing? Well, why don't we start with printing money out of thin air? So the government issues a bond, and then the Federal Reserve gives them X amount of dollars for that bond. Where did that money come from? The money was backed by the bond of the US government. But the Federal Reserve they don't have a printing press for money. The money comes from a treasury. It doesn't come from the Federal Reserve. But they don't even do that. They just type numbers into a computer, and money magically appears out of thin air. So if the whole system that we are involved in is a sham, everything else beyond there is a sham as well. So that's the absolute height of evil, where they do whatever they want, say whatever they want, and do whatever they want for the very best enemy that money can buy. Because these people that run the Federal Reserve, these people that fund the cartel, the evil banking cartel, which is what the Federal Reserve is, it's just a group of banks that have come together and they own a little piece of the Federal Reserve, and each one of those people has an equal vote. They are funding the wars that we know today. They're funding it. Who was the biggest beneficiary of going to Iraq in terms of a private company? There's a company out there, you would have heard of them before, they're called Halliburton. Halliburton was the biggest beneficiary of the war in Iraq. Not the Iraqi people, not the American and coalition troops that went there. Halliburton was the beneficiary of it. And who's the owner of Halliburton? Sorry, Dick Cheney. It's where it all comes to. And it's not tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theories. They are just facts. And if you want to find the facts, you've got to actually go and do the research and find these things in these books. And you have to spend the time with this to actually see. So what has all this got to do with crypto? Well, crypto is the alternative system to this. And crypto is a system that is not influenced by these things because it's decentralized and it's away from the prying eyes and the evil doers of the world trying to control the world. I'll leave this section here and hand over to you, Ed, because I've been doing a lot of talking here as I do. What's the one thing that people want after they have unlimited money? It's a pretty simple answer. There's only one thing left after you have all of the wealth on planet Earth, and that is power. And they want to control you, and they want to control what you spend your money on, where you go, what you say, what you do. They want to control you. And the direct threat to them is blockchain. I was looking just before this video, as I was having my morning coffee, I came across a video about this thing called Odyssey. And it's the alternative to YouTube, where what you do is you upload your video onto Odyssey and it gets distributed through a blockchain. So a blockchain is just a series of other computers that are out there. So they can never, ever censor you. They can never censor you. So I can go over there to Odyssey and record a video and say whatever the hell I want without fear of being taken down, cancelled, or censored, because there's nothing anybody can do about it. The only person that can take that down is the person with the keys to it, which is me. The only way that they could do that is by coercing me to take that down. If you do something wrong, like you're inciting violence or all of those regular things, obviously your video is not going to last there very long. But strictly speaking, it's permissionless, so there's no one controlling it. You're uploading your video to the blockchain, and you can charge people to watch it, or you can make it freely available. So there's a bunch of things that are happening there. And because I can go over there and say what I want and be critical of the government and critical of some medicine people are forced to take, I can't be censored over there. They can't censor me. But here in YouTube, the algorithms are super sophisticated and I can be censored. So I need to be careful about what I say. So is that free speech? No. And over there on the blockchain, that is free speech. And who doesn't like that? The evil cabal doesn't like that. What do you think, Ed?
Rob, I knew there was something that I liked about you. So I think everybody, if you want to re-listen to something, listen to the last 10 or 15 minutes that Rob, the last bit of diatribe of this podcast. Boy, that was fantastic. Now, I do think that the good part, the good news in all of this is that governments are slow to respond, right? So the slower that they are able to adapt to crypto, the slower they are, the more adoption the crypto can do, right? So this will make them, the government, less relevant over time. So I predict that the government will try and introduce some version of a central bank digital currency, otherwise known as a CBDC. Okay. Now this CBDC it'll be the first shot in removing the banking system from society as we know it. If you play out the doomsday scenario, then you end up at a place where every person is issued a Federal Reserve bank account, and then there's the complete removal of all cash from society. Now, if you look closely, the U.S. government is already making moves with the stablecoin USDC, and they're considering doing it with this coin. Now, it's not some type of tinfoil hat wearing theory either, guys. Right? The U.S. government was considering appointing Sole Amarova, who is a Soviet-trained economist, not a Russian-trained economist, okay, a Soviet-trained. She went to the University of Moscow on a Lenin scholarship, okay, and now she's a professor at is it Cornell, I think, or she's a professor at a prestigious U.S. university now, but she's a Soviet-trained economist, and she has openly said, just last year, not 15 years ago, last year, she openly said that banks need to go and the Fed should control everything. Now, this woman was in the running as comptroller of the currency. And it was during those congressional interviews that all of this came out. Now, perhaps the single good thing is that Joe Biden has ever done was that he wasn't able to get her appointed. This hope we keep her away from our money supply. That would have been the beginning of the end. Now, here, collectivist and socialist views are well documented, and she should be the spark. She would have been the spark that ignited the destruction of the American economy.
Yeah, her defense was that they were wargaming the scenario, what would happen, and her defense in front of those congressional interviews was that, we had to come up with some ideas, and these are the ideas that we came up with. But given the fullness of time, she would have had the opportunity to implement them. CBDCs are the worst idea ever. And they go against the grain of everything that blockchain represents and stands for. So ladies and gentlemen, if you've never heard this before, if you've never heard of central bank digital currencies, they are very, very real. The Chinese have created the digital yuan. And think about it. If the Chinese need to trade in the world, they need to trade in US dollars. So they swap yuan for USD to buy whatever they need to buy. That's just how the economy works. And people take payment in US dollars. If you want to buy our goods and services here in Australia, you probably have to pay in US dollars. That's just the way that it works. And I know if I transact in America, I have to do that. And so many times I've bought things from other parts of the world and I transact in US dollars. And that's because it's the world's reserve currency. And that is also the way that the Federal Reserve and Wall Street and the US Congress implement sanctions. So if you think about something like Iran, who forms part of the so-called axis of evil and the banking system, and the government doesn't like it, the way that they implement sanctions onto them is by taking their SWIFT codes away. so you can't transact in US dollars. I can't buy Iranian oil in Iranian currency because I don't have any and I don't have enough to give to you. And I definitely can't buy it in US dollars because all the SWIFT codes have been turned off at their banks in Tehran. So there's no way that I can buy their oil. But here we are in 2021 with the Chinese government rolling out their Chinese digital yuan, their CBDC, and they've got a deal in place to supply Iran with weapons for the next 20 years, while Iran will supply China with oil for the next 20 years. So how are they circumventing all of the sanctions that are there? Well, it's easy. Just buy it with Chinese yuan CBDCs. Easy. And it's not like Bitcoin. It's just a digital version of a currency. And it's definitely on a blockchain. And it definitely has all of the hallmarks of what cryptocurrency is. It's just centralized and controlled. And that's why CBDCs is such a bad thing. Because if the US government ended up using USDC as the reserve currency, all they're doing is moving from the fiat system to this digital version of a system. And likewise here in Australia, if they tried to create an Aussie dollar, an Aussie version of a CBDC, all you're doing is moving the fiat system into a digital version because it's controlled and it's centralized. And crypto is meant to be decentralized, permissionless, and trustless and secure, but it's not. And because crypto is those things, because Bitcoin and Ethereum and Ripple and all of those things are decentralized, they're permissionless and they're trustless and they're secure, the cabal does not like them because they can't control them and they can't do anything about it. So what they want to do is they want to destroy it and they want to make it irrelevant. CBDCs are a really bad idea because they're the beginning of a social credit system, and that social credit system can totally destroy society as you know it. And if you look at that idiot Omarova and see what she says, she's a huge advocate for CBDCs, and she believes that banks should go and CBDCs should replace them, and the Federal Reserve should control that and be in charge of that. The social credit system in China is found on your mobile phone. And if you go and try and go into the train station in China and go and tap in to the train with your phone, guess what doesn't work if you've been a naughty boy or a naughty girl? You can't get into the train station. You can't buy a train ticket. You can't buy an airline ticket. You can't go here. You can't go into that shop. You can't do what the government says you can do. And the way that they're going to do that is by controlling you with your mobile phone and a central bank digital currency. That forms the basis of a social credit system. Here in Australia, we've got 3/4 of a social credit system. The only thing that we're missing is the CBDC. With every single person here in Australia has got a government app on their phone, which connects to their Medicare, which connects to their driver's license, which connects to their address, and everything to do with them is right there on their phone. The next step for that is for the government to say, okay, no more banks. Everyone's going to be issued a reserve bank account, which will exist in your app there. And if you're a naughty boy and don't do the right things, then all of that's going to stop you from doing what it is that you want to do. So CBDCs are just a really, really bad idea. And the reason for that is totalitarianism, hyperinflation, and total and complete and absolute destruction of life as you know it. Remember, we started off by saying that freedom means having the money to travel where you want to travel, to say what you want to say, to live where you want to live. And if we end up with a society or a world that has central bank digital currencies and that lives on your mobile phone and they track everything that you do and they listen to everything that you say, that is a complete destruction of life as we know it. Remember, folks, the communist doctrine says that the very first thing to do to take over a country and to implement communism is to destroy and to debase a country's currency. And the Federal Reserve in the United States is doing that right now. It's happening right before your eyes, and they're doing it with unlimited money printing, and the inflation is taking off. And what they're going to do is they're going to bring out a disease Mark II in 2022, and they're going to use that to create a worldwide global depression. And this is happening right before our eyes. Before I got onto this podcast, and this might date the podcast if you're listening to this in the future, but I saw a guy standing in front of the Parliament of Australia, and here we are in the 30th of November, 2021, and he was saying, did you know, ladies and gentlemen, on his TikTok video, that the federal government is trying to close down Parliament for the next 7 months and only sit for 10 days of the next 7 months. Why would that be? Is that some sort of nefarious, dodgy thing that's happening right there in front of us? But what can I do about whether or not politicians go to work in Canberra for the next 7 months? I can't do anything about that. What I can do is I can make myself ready, because the cabal that is controlling the world, that controls this government here, and all the corruption and all the criminal activities that happen here, and all of the crime that's perpetrated on the citizens of Australia here, that is happening right now before our eyes. 2020 and 2021 is going to look like a kindergarten picnic compared to what's coming in the next 12 to 18 months. The money printing that we're seeing in the US is the beginning of the end, and it's the first step towards the destruction of everything that we know and hold dear in our life. And if you're listening to the industry closely, and you'll see that the governments are coordinating to regulate crypto. They're coordinating together as a collective to regulate crypto. They use a system called the FATF, which stands for the Financial Action Task Force. And they use that, it's funny, because they use that to make up the rules out of thin air, the same way that they make money out of thin air at the Federal Reserves of all of our countries and the central banks of all of our countries. And they make these rules out of thin air in an attempt to control and regulate every single aspect of crypto, because they recognize that they can't control it. There's nothing that they can do about it. And they better do something about that soon before it runs away and takes control and actually takes over the fiat system, because at some point we'll reach critical mass and they won't win. I think that we're at critical mass. I think that we're close to it. If they manage to gain control and do regulate crypto out of existence, the only other option will be a central bank digital currency. But it won't be an Aussie dollar or a US dollar or a Chinese yuan. It'll be a world currency. And every government of the world will be held to that particular thing, which is a really, really big problem, because that ends up being a worldwide social credit system. We end up in a big, giant, open-air concentration camp. And this is an evil collectivist ideology that will lead to a dystopian society that you just cannot even begin to imagine. And this is not tinfoil hat wearing stuff. This is actually happening right now. There's another system out there that they're using to control big businesses, and the cabal call this the ESG. And what that stands for is environmental, social, and governance. And again, what they did is they came up with these three catchwords, and they're catch-all terms for such big, wide-ranging topics. And what they do is they look at companies individually to make sure that they're environmental, they've got good social stuff happening there, and they've got good governance. And if you tick all the boxes there, you're more likely to receive investment from outside interests. And large companies, large public companies need this outside influence. They need this outside investment to make it work. But if you don't comply with their made-up rules that they make up out of thin air, that they pull out of their ass, there'll be no investors' money for you. None. Now, these morons are moving to make crypto irrelevant to fund managers by saying that crypto is not good for the environment, especially as it relates to Bitcoin. It's not good socially because it's bad for the environment, and there's no governance because it's on a blockchain and it's decentralized. So that's how they're trying to make crypto irrelevant. And these are the two levers that they're pulling, and the two mechanisms that they're using to try and make crypto irrelevant. And they're doing this because they understand that most of the market cap that is in crypto is institutional money that's speculating on the price going up. So if this money leaves the market because of ESG rules, then what happens? You'll be faced with a whole lot of collapse in the crypto market, right? So you're faced with a choice: either get rid of your crypto or lose your investors. Which one? Well, it's easy to sell the crypto. Just get rid of it. Doesn't matter if it's a loss. I need those investors. So earlier in the year, Elon Musk came out and dumped all of his Bitcoin. Why did he dump his Bitcoin? Suddenly he had a whole lot of it, and then suddenly he dumped it. But why? Because the ESG came over and said, you better dump that Bitcoin, pal, because it's bad for the environment. And if you don't, all of the investors are going to pull their money out. So he dumped the Bitcoin and he went with the Dogecoin. And the reason he went with Dogecoin is because it is environmental. So there's much less energy consumption. So it's a non-starter there. But I think he's still kind of crossing a fine line there. But if you think that Elon Musk dumped Bitcoin and came out and said, oh, it's bad for the environment because he thought it was bad for the environment, why did he have it for such a long time then? And the answer is because the ESG came over and said, hey, get rid of that Bitcoin, or we'll pull our investors out. There's a lot there. Ed, what do you think, man? It's pretty crazy.
I'm so glad you brought up that ESG, by the way. That is such an important point that nobody seems to really know about. You know, we talk a lot about the social credit system going on in China. Well, guess what? It's here too.
Yeah.
It's in corporate form, but it affects us all. So we have to find a way to talk about that ESG in the near future, because that's important stuff. But you know what? Why don't we take a quick break and then wrap up this one?
Well, Ed, we covered a lot of ground, as we always do on this podcast, mate. I'd like to sum up the show and give you a chance to do that as well. And I would sum up by saying that I still believe that 10 out of 10 people get into crypto because they want to make a quick buck. And everyone with that mindset just fails to recognize that there's literally a battle for society going on underneath the surface. It's pretty scary stuff. If it sounds dramatic to you, the people that control the world, meaning the Federal Reserve of the US, they're doing everything they can to make crypto irrelevant. So it really is a war. They're really trying to make it irrelevant by trying to regulate it out of existence, to trying to use all the mechanisms and levers that they can. And they're doing that in an attempt, and again, such a big statement, to destroy the US dollar. I honestly don't think that I would ever be having a conversation on a freaking podcast recording like this saying that the people that run the world are trying to destroy the US dollar. Why on earth would they try and do that? And the reason they want to do that is because they want to create this stupid CBDC and move towards a one world government where they control absolutely everything. It's crazy.
No, gosh, Rob, there sure is a lot to take in, especially for people who are hearing this all for the first time. Now, I know you're going to have reference materials, in the show notes below to help people understand the magnitude of all this. So, ladies and gentlemen, please take a peek at the show notes to find all of those links. Okay, and try to take some time to read them, because this is big stuff. Rob, okay, so I want to sum up by saying that even I learned something here today. We always have, whenever I talk to you, we always have a nice long conversation, whether it's on camera or off camera, and I always come away learning a little bit more about things, because there is a lot to know. There's a lot going on out there that a lot of people are not really paying attention to. So hopefully this podcast will help fill in some holes for people who don't really know what's going on out there, and they're not getting solid information from the usual, news sources. So I hope they turn to us to get, the real news. So, but they can find some solace in the things, let me back up here a little bit, because I know that we covered a lot of things here that were kind of dark, but they're, important. But Rob and I are basically optimistic guys. We try to look at life, at optimistic terms. So we always try to find solace in the things that are dear to us. So, and we encourage you to do the same thing. Find solace in the things that are dear to you, that matter to you, and with the people you love. Okay, there has been so much division in recent times, and with the endless 24-hour news cycle in your ears, it can be hard to remember that life is actually, pretty good. And I also wanted to round up by saying that if you're into crypto or you're thinking about it, then I believe you'll be on the right side of history. Okay, crypto, as we've shown you today, is the alternative to the evil and corrupt system that we are all forced to endure. And the more of us that are part of the crypto, sphere, the less chance that the cabal can control us. With their stupid CBDCs and their bullshit social credit systems. So we hope that you're getting some value out of these podcasts, in that way.
Yeah, well said, man. I would definitely echo what you're saying there as well. These are really dark topics. I can tell you that reading this book here, The Creature from Jekyll Island, I've read it, but I've also listened to it a couple of times, and the audio book is 16 hours long. So I've had a lot of Edward Griffin in my ears, and you have to listen to it a few times to really understand it. A lot of it's like different language that you haven't heard before. A lot of it's banker language in there and stuff as well. But I can tell you that it really pulls your energy down. It's a really a dark thing to be talking about, and we're talking about dark things on this podcast, but we want to wake you up. Yeah. We don't want you to be sleepwalking to the edge and then get to the edge and go, oh, what? And then someone gives you a shove and then over you go. What we want you to do is to be sleepwalking, wake up and go, hey, there's the edge there. Let's go this way. Now I'm awake. I can go that way. And it takes time and effort, and it takes research. And most of all, it takes the ability to use and apply your critical thinking to what we're talking about. Don't take our word for it. Don't take Edward's word for it. Don't take Anthony's word for it either. Apply your critical thinking to these topics that we're talking about and come to your own conclusions, come to your own version of those things. Because once you do that, it's a really empowering thing. It feels good to be in control, and it feels good to know about all of these things. And it reminds me, I'll close out on this note, it reminds me of the movie The Matrix, when Neo is faced with the red pill or the blue pill. And how many memes have you seen with the red pill or the blue pill? You take the red pill and you wake up and he comes out of the Matrix and it's like, oh my God, this is this awful thing. And then the other guy that had already come out of the Matrix, you might remember the character, he's got a big mustache. He just wants to take a blue pill and go back into the Matrix and eat a steak, because life is just better when you're blissfully ignorant. And it's very, very hard to be aware of all of these things, because you can't not look at society and you can't not look at what's going on around you and feel a little bit of trepidation and feel a little bit of anxiety and feel a little bit of outrage and just wanting to do something about it. And I really think the thing that you can do about it is to get into crypto, because the more people that are in crypto, the harder it is for the cabal to actually control us with a fiat system, because I don't care what they say over there. I've got a foot in both camps. I'm in crypto and I'm in the fiat system, and I bridge my profits and what I make in crypto into the fiat system. So I've got a foot in both camps. If you want to know some more about how we do that, you can join us in the Crypto Cartel and we'll definitely show you that. But you can't just have everything into cryptos, because if the cabal makes that completely illegal and outlaws it and says, not bad luck, everyone loses their money, too bad, you can't do that anymore, and they block all the IP addresses and they control everything, you're stuffed. There's nothing you can do about it. So you need to have a foot in both of these camps and play both sides of the coin at the same time. Because if they start pulling those levers, life's going to get really, really tricky for you. But the more people that are in crypto, the harder we're going to make it for them. And there's nothing that they can do about it. The more of us that do it, the more of us that do it, the more of us that get involved in it, the more of us that play both sides of that coin, stop them from making credit, pull your money out of the bank, put it into gold, to silver, to Bitcoin, to Ethereum, to all of those things, that's just going to make their life that much harder. And your job is to fight against this enemy, this insidious enemy, this creature from Jekyll Island. It's your job to fight against them. All right, Ed, if people want to catch you, mate, what's the best way to connect with you?
Well, okay, so you can reach me at ed at thecryptocartel.io, or you can reach me on my YouTube channel called Hey Ed, or you can over at the Crypto Cartel, of course. I'm pretty active there, so if they send me a message at the Crypto Cartel, I'll see the message there, and I'll get right back to them.
Awesome. Same for me. You can reach me on the same email, just rob@thecryptocartel.io, or over in the cartel itself at thecryptocartel.io itself, and you can send me a message over there. If you want to connect with me, you can do that on Instagram as well, and my handle is rob.brus77. As always, ladies and gentlemen, all of the links to anything that we've talked about here on today's show, certainly to those two books that we've been talking about, will be in there in the show notes. So just scroll down if you're watching this on YouTube, so you won't have to go poking around in Google for any of that. And if you're listening to this on your phone, just have a little look at your phone and the links will be right there. If you've got a question or some feedback for the show, just reach out to Ed or myself and we'll get on back to you. And if you like what you're hearing on the show, don't forget to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening or watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for us as well, because that always helps us out with the algorithm. Well, that wraps it up for today's show. Ed, do you have a parting comment or quote for us, mate?
Believe it or not, Rob, I sure do. I actually have a presidential quote from Ronald Reagan. All right. He said this, and I quote, I hope we once again remind people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is neat and predictable as a law of physics. As the government expands, liberty contracts. End quote. Okay, so maybe it's a little ironic that he said it since he's part of,
He's part of the cabal.
He actually is a personal hero of mine, but because he says things like that, he's a big believer in freedom and in smaller government. So how can you not love a guy who likes small government?
Yeah, there's truth to the quote. Even though he was part of the cabal and part of it, there's truth in it. And when you hear truth, you definitely can't unhear it. That's a good way to wrap it up. Let's get out of here. See you, Ed.
All right. See you, Rob.